Let me welcome all of you to Chat with Matt. The purpose of Chat with Matt is to find guest speakers who have something I think important for all of you to hear. We've had, I don't know, about a dozen sessions in the last several months with guest speakers, and we record the meetings and they're available on our website, which is a new invention. I want to thank my wife, Peggy, who recruited our guest speaker, Becky Surran, for today's session. Becky, I'm going to let Becky introduce herself. Perhaps she'll spend a minute and do a classic 90-second announcement, tell us how she got to where she is today. We're going to get started here. Becky's an award-winning and 9-time Emmy-nominated television journalist. She's waiting for this. These are the joys of working from home. Becky, we're going to let you get started here because you have nobody moving in your background.
The dog will in a minute, probably, but she's pretty small.
I'm adding a spotlight, so you're now on, and you can start going. Tell us all about yourself. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, it's great to see you.
What was the career journey?
It was great to see you. It's great to see you and Peggy and everybody else joining us today. Really nice to be here. My background is television journalism. I started with a company called News 12 Connecticut, a division of Cablevision, back when cable was first starting. And then I stayed with the company and the station for more than 35 years. It was, wow. Because it was, first of all, fulfilling work that I loved with people that I loved. It was very close to my home, 4 children. So it was the way I could strike the right balance between raising my family and doing what I love. After our company was acquired back in 2016 and 2017, I went to work in public relations in New York City. Did that for a short while, and then a former business associate from News 12 and I did some brainstorming. We said, you know, it's time that we start something ourselves. So we launched our own video production company called Authenticity TV and Video, which is where I currently am right now and loving it. In addition to that, I also work for Kaplan. And so I co-host 2 programs there, one for Financial Management Network, and the other for Certified Public Accountant Report. So I do those 2 shows on a monthly basis. So I also dabble in some radio over at Sacred Heart University, WSHU, do some fill-in work over there occasionally. So that's what I'm up to right now. And that's
it sounds like you're keeping busy. Sounds like you had what we would refer to in the industry as almost a permanent job early in your career.
You know, I mean, it was at a time where many people had permanent jobs, right?
I know.
It was not that unusual to stay with the company for 35 years. And it just happened to work out the way I liked it, the way the company liked it. It was great synergy. Sometimes when you're with a company that long, things become stale and there's no room for upward mobility. That was not the case for me. So I was able to go from reporter to host of a daily live talk show to senior news anchor. And so that was a progression that allowed me to learn new skills along the way and not feel as if I was becoming stale in what I was doing. So it doesn't happen very often. People say, you know, why didn't you go off and, you know, try to work at the network or at a network affiliate? Uh-huh. Just for me, this was the sweet spot, really. And so if it's working, why change it? I did some freelance work for Walt Disney. They had a magazine called Family Fun, and I was their on-air representative for the magazine. So I would do Good Morning America or the Weekend Today show or Today in New York, representing the magazine. But with regard to full-time work, Cablevision and News 12 Connecticut, that was my home. I loved it.
Yeah, well, what I always tell people is, I don't know, they kept paying me. Why would I leave?
Hey, listen, in today's world or even yesteryear world, you know, finding an environment that you love, the people you work with, you love the work that you do, you love the product that you generate, and you come home at the end of the day and you feel good about everything. Yeah. It doesn't happen very often. So it worked out really well for me.
Yeah, if you're working with people that you like and the work is enjoyable, there is no reason to change. But now, as all of us are getting older, we're doing a lot of entrepreneurial things, and I'm delighted to hear that you're also doing some entrepreneurial things. And usually we have 2 or 3 jobs going at once.
Well, I think
My wife Peggy, as you know, has reinvented herself more times than I can count. She always has some new line of business she's working on, and I think that's great. You know, we all acquire many talents over the course of our career, and I think the perspective that we're going to talk about it today is that all of us are running meetings on Zoom, and we're there. We're on camera. We're running a big event, and I think a lot of the things that you've learned over your career are applicable to all of us in managing our Zoom meetings. So dive right in.
Yeah, well, you and I were talking a moment ago about the limited time quite often you have in a Zoom meeting as opposed to a meeting that would be in an office place. So
Yes.
in television news, every day starts out with what's the lead of the story today? What's happening? What are people talking about? In our shop, there was a meeting twice a day. There was a 9 o'clock, a 2 o'clock, at 9 o'clock in the morning. Everybody would sit down. That's the assignment editor, reporters that were in-house, photographers that were there, anchors, assistant news director, director, all of them together, going through what the stories of the day, more stories than you needed to fill 22 minutes. So it was a negotiation, a debate, what was going to fit, what wasn't going to fit, what you had time for, what was considered the most important. Obviously, there's certain breaking news that happens that's indisputable. That's going to be your lead. But the other points of it were negotiations. So, and that happened twice a day. And that's true when you're in business communication. What's the most important idea, message you want to get across to the people that you're communicating to? It's so easy to go off on a tangent. It's so easy to stray. And some people respond well by just a couple notes, some meetings with agendas, however the meetings are run, but staying on target, staying on message, and remembering what the most important idea, concept, goal is to achieve with your meeting is essential.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned when you watch the news. They start out and they're going to tell you what stories are going to cover during this 30-minute segment. That's
Right.
also a good way to open up your Zoom call.
Yes, the headlines, or a tease. We call them either one. The headlines are usually off the top. The teas are at the bottom of what we call the blocks. But so yes, headlines. This is what we're talking about today. 4 bullets. This is what we have to accomplish. And then making sure you get to all of those. If it's one thing to have them outlined, but if you don't move things along to get to all of them, you haven't accomplished what you wanted to accomplish.
Oh, for sure. So when you're planning the meeting, it's sort of like writing the story.
Right. Well, after you leave that meeting, everybody kind of goes off and continues to fulfill the role that they have within the organization. But for producers, associate producers, anchors, and in some shops, it's writers as well, and copywriters, is you start writing the stories. Not all stories are coming from the field. Some are coming from news agencies. Others are coming from just phone calls and just, talking with sources. So and every story, there's a formula. There's the headline, there's the nuts and bolts of it all, and then there's the conclusion. What's the wrap? In today's world, as opposed to when I started years ago, it used to be that final line would be some kind of a wrap it up sentence. Well, and today it's a little different. It's really, as it is in business and business communications, it's a call to action. So in news, it's sending people to one of the social platforms, to the website, where there is additional information about that story. So that's typically, and so it's kind of a mix depending on, you can't toss people out to a website or a social page with every story. So there's a little bit of a mix of those, but that kind of just talks about just highlights with business, how important it is to have that nuts and bolts, the headline, and if it's an email, that's your subject line, right? And then get to your bulleted points or write it out in clear, concise sentences. That's really important in television news as opposed to newspapers, is to keep nice, concise sentences and then to wrap it all up in a nice, tidy sentence, or in a business communication, some kind of a call to action. I'll get back to you. Look forward to seeing you again. Can we set up a meeting? That kind of a final sentence.
It's very important that everybody leaves the meeting knowing what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
And I really like the point you made. I don't know if everyone picked up on it. There are things that you can, for example, in the world of business, you can say, and I'm sending you an email summarizing all these things. Use your other, you want to use your other tools.
Yes. I mean, you just don't want to say good talking to you or great to catch up. Or in business, I mean, it's all about, even if you don't have something to sell or you don't have a meeting you want to set up, it's about maintaining that relationship. So there's got to be some kind of a line in there so that you can continue to engage back and forth. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not that day, but maybe in a month from now. So just to be able to continue that relationship is very important, and to include some kind of a line to get you there.
Yeah, and I like your point about you have to get everybody's attention. Everybody is not going to be on the same page. You don't know my background, but I grew up in Indiana, and one of the little jokes is that the guy's driving down the road and he comes to a farmer with a mule standing in the middle of the road and he can't get past him. So he gets out of his car, he asks the farmer to move the mule. The farmer picks up a 2x4, whacks the mule upside the head, and the guy's kind of horrified, and he says, well, why'd you do that? He says, well, first I have to get his attention.
Well,
so I think that's also true in a meeting. You better make sure everybody's understanding what you're about to tell them.
Absolutely. And that's why quite often with writers, news writers, and writers in newspapers, etc., don't write the headline first. They write the bulk of the story, then they go back and they'll write the headline, because they've got a much better idea of what they've covered, and they're just kind of more immersed in it. They've got a better feel for it. Sometimes if you write the lead line, or not the lead line, but the headline first, it may take you in a direction that's really not the way the story should go. So it's better to go back and do that as one of your final steps.
Very, very smart. I worked at an advertising agency for most of a decade, and some of our very smart creative people would write the headline and tell the marketing people to back into the strategy.
Ah.
But they were, of course, they were so smart, they were right about the strategy.
Okay, yeah.
The headline they created was the strategy. But most people don't catch that. So so the next point you made in the notes you sent me was about breaking down the whatever you're going to discuss so that it's understandable.
You know, that is so important in news today. I mean, what today, the news, one of the lead stories on the nightly news tonight is going to be the stimulus package that was signed off on. Well,
yeah.
How many pages? 600 at least, right?
Yeah.
So how does that reporter break down 600 pages into what does it matter to you? And that is key for reporters and writers and associates and producers in news. You have to be able to take complicated situations and break them down, and reporters especially, break them down so that people understand them. You know, break them down into digestible chunks. And sometimes it requires one or two sentences that gives you a historical perspective. Sometimes you're writing a story on a case, it's a murder case, but that murder case, depending on where you are and the coverage of the story, could have happened 10 years ago, but you're getting to an appeal case. So you have to be able to refresh the memories of your viewers in terms of what happened. And that can be done, if you're a good writer, in one sentence pretty much, or two maybe. But you have to be able to not only break things down so they're very digestible, very understandable, engaging, and then also be able to provide the context that you need to in the story.
Right. And in our world, it's not, depending on how many people you've invited to the meeting, everybody who's attending may not know the backstory, and it may serve our purpose to do a little recap.
Right. Or oftentimes, let's say you're pitching somebody or you're selling a product and it's software and it's complicated.
Yeah.
And they just need to know, why do I need it? Why does it apply to me? Why is it important to me? So you have to be able to come up with a pitch that can do that, that can break that down for them. So they say, oh, wow, okay, I really might need that. Oh, now that you explained it to me that way, I get it.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's the same principle, you know. I think there's a lot of information out there in today's world, and
Yes.
to be able to clear through the fog and to be able to do that for people, certainly in television, it's essential. But I think too, when you're out there and there's so much competition in business, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you pitch yourself in a very concise way that you get people's attention and you make them understand what you do very clearly and why your service or your product is important to them?
Yeah. I think one of the truths of business today is that people are covering a lot more territory than they used to.
Right.
There was a time early in my career, I had a lot of people working for me. And, you know, because each task could be broken down into smaller components and had to be because we were doing things without computers.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
old,
in
you didn't know.
hands. Now we're checking ourselves out of the grocery store and everything else.
Yeah, now everything is, people are covering a lot of information in their own
Absolutely.
areas of responsibility.
Absolutely. So you have to be able to multitask in that way and really be able to achieve a laser-like focus and then convey that that laser-like focus on the topic to the people and to the audience that you're talking to.
Yeah. So the next topic you came up with is understanding your audience, which is always key. Peggy and I have this friend, Debbie Fay, who is an expert in PowerPoint presentations. And one of the things she says is to make sure you turn your focus 180 degrees. And it's on point with your knowing your audience.
Absolutely. In TV, their demographics, you know, so you know the audience that you want to reach out to, you know who's the big spender when it comes to advertising, sales, placement, etc. And also for us, it was surveys were done. What are your viewers, in addition to the heavy news stories, what are some of the feature stories? What are the areas of interest that they have? Is it the environment? Is it education? Is it politics? So you would skew some of your newscasts to achieving, you know, to reaching out into those areas. So if it's environment, do you say to a reporter, okay, I need you to put together a special report series on electric vehicles or some topic along those lines, so that you're able to reach that audience and give them information that they would see as valuable. So in business, it's true too. I mean, it's like delivering a speech. A doctor is delivering a speech on coronavirus, right? If he's delivering a speech to his peers, to fellow physicians, it's going to have one tone. If he's delivering a speech to the media, it's going to have a different tone. If he's delivering that speech to pharmaceutical writers, it'll be slightly different. And if he's delivering that speech to the general public, it will be very different. So you really do have to know who you're communicating to and with, and then how you fine tune and craft your message to that audience.
Yeah, because you want to, what is it, Peggy? The folly of communication is the belief that it's taken place.
The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Thank you for that correction.
Yes, no, right. So that people actually understand what you're talking about, and you've actually crafted whatever it might be, whatever form of communication, that it is understandable to them, that you know, it's entertaining to them, whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's just key in just any form of communication, knowing your audience.
Yeah, and the next issue that you had on your list was timing, how you lay out the story.
Right. Timing in TV is everything. In a half-hour newscast, you really only have 22 minutes. And that was when I was working in. Who knows? At the network, it could be totally different. Who knows what their numbers are? For the network, it might be even less. So you don't have a lot of time. So every story they decide, usually it's the executive producer, will decide how much time it's worth. Is it a reporter's 90-second, what they call package? Is it a 90-second package with a live shot around it? Is it what we used to call a VOSOT, which is you hear the anchor read a little bit and then there's a sound bite. How long is that sound bite? Well, you shouldn't give us a sound bite that's 15 seconds, Becky. We need a 10-second sound bite. That's it, nothing more. Is it just a reader? 35, and it's so funny when young writers would start off and they'd give me what we call a reader, and it would be a minute. And I'd say, whoa, all right, let's, we got to back this up. No readers are going to go over 30 seconds. If you can get under it between 20 and 30, you're gold. But a minute reader, your viewer is gone. Because today, when people are watching TV, this is what we noticed. I'm trying to remember the year, maybe late 2000, like, I don't know, 2005, 2006, something like that. The research would showed us that people what you call double screening it. So they're watching TV and they're on their computer at the same time, or they're on their cell phone at the same time, or they're on their iPad at the same time. So not only were you fighting for them to stay with you for the full 22 minutes, you were fighting for them to just pay attention while they're sitting there, you know, just for the minute or two they're sitting. Otherwise, they're distracted and they're, you know, going on Amazon or they're researching something else or looking at that same story on another network, depending.
Yeah, and that's what we're dealing with today. Our group being older, I think, I hope everybody understands the limited attention span of people who are younger than we are.
Oh,
That's just
a problem.
the DNA today. And on Zoom, they're checking their cell phone. They may have, I have two monitors. A lot of people have two monitors working from home. So they're distracted by whatever's on their other screen. Keeping them focused is and keeping your meeting moving along so that they're engaged is key.
I mean, and also in your correspondence, in your emails. I remember I used to get pitches because I do some booking as well. And I would get a pitch and it would go on for 4 pages. And I thought, I don't have time to get through 4 pages because I've got 100 emails I have to get through. So knowing how long your email should be or whatever it might be, whatever kind of correspondence, it's got to be for, you know, an email. It shouldn't go on for more than a page unless this is something you're really in the weeds on. It's something, an ongoing conversation. But, you know, and how long your meeting is, how long your presentation is, all of that is key. And you're right, this generation, there's a lot of research showing, you know, I wouldn't distractible. I mean, they're very smart people, but they don't have brand loyalty, for example. I would buy Tide detergent. I'd probably use Tide detergent for 15 years. Well, a younger person today might say, nah, I'm gonna try Arm & Hammer this time. I'm gonna try it Downy. I'm gonna try something totally different. So you really do the pacing of a show, the delivery of a business communication, especially when you have younger people that you're working with. They move at lightning speed, and you have to be able to keep up with them.
Back to your point about timing, though, it's very important that people understand that they do have a limited amount of time, and they want to make sure everything gets covered during their meeting. As I've been interviewing people for Chat with Matt, I start with an outline as you provided me, and I try to make sure we get through all of it, and I watch the clock.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I did when
I don't want to leave out any of the important pieces you've decided are required for this conversation.
Well, when I was co-host of our live daily talk show, you would get 5 minutes per interview. But let's say you're interviewing an author on World War II. Well, 5 minutes on a book on World War II that's probably 400 pages, you know, you really have to figure out what's the most compelling information, maybe something people haven't heard before. And once you get into that interview, moving that along so you don't get stuck on question 2 and your time is up.
Yeah, you have all kinds of different people at meetings. Some of them can talk and talk and talk, and you have to find ways to stop them.
Yes, they will suck all the oxygen out of the room.
Right.
And you got to keep moving along, and otherwise everybody else just tunes out, and there's no point to
for several years, I worked at a publishing company that was a legal publisher, and so a lot of the people in the room were attorneys, and apparently they take a class how how to talk and talk and talk and not say anything. Even with 3 cups of coffee, I couldn't stay awake.
Right, but I guess they knew they
Really
were
terrible. And I mean, and that's a good segue into listening, which is one of the key things in running a meeting.
Well, I think listening, and Peggy, maybe you chime in here as well. I think listening, and I think the experts will tell you that listening is one of the most important parts of communicating. In news, it was, and in the talk show, it was essential, because if the assignment editor doesn't listen to the reporter in the field, and if the reporter in the field is not listening to the police officer, and if there's a phone call that comes in with a tip, or in that meeting that I referred to at the very beginning of the day, nobody's listening to what the various pitches of stories are, then you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on key information, but also in missing out, you're going to convey erroneous information because it doesn't have the right facts in it. So you have to be able in television news to listen on the news side in the actual putting together the shows. Listen to even the police scanners. The police scanners, I was surrounded at the end of my tenure. I had 4 police scanners going around me all day long. It got to be a little much, but they were all over the newsroom because nobody wanted to miss anything, because they go between the various departments and the various municipalities. So it was half about listening to the editor. The editor says, I am not making slot. This story is not going to be edited in time because whatever, the SD card was corrupt, or they couldn't download something, or whatever it was. Yeah. So that producer say, hey, I got to listen to this guy because I got to fill that 60 seconds because he's not making slot. So it's, listening in business is equally important. I think if it's a client relationship, listening to what the needs of your client are, and maybe that means you have to readjust the way what you have, or the way you describe what you have. Listening to your coworkers, listening to your boss. Your boss could be sending you maybe subtle signals, and to be, I wouldn't say kind, but to think, okay, you're going to get it, that I'm conveying this to you. But if you're not listening and you're just bounding along, you really could upend your career. So, and Peggy, maybe, if you agree with me on this, I mean, this is essential.
Yeah, totally, everything you said was absolutely right. And the one thing I want to add that you didn't mention was that too often when we are listening, we really are just listening for the person to pause so that we can say or do what we want to do, rather than listening and building on what they're saying. And I think that can become a problem as well. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was true in the talk show. Would be a perfect example of what you're talking about. I could ask a question, that person's answering that question. If I'm listening, waiting for the point to jump in, but I'm not really listening, I could ask a question that he's really half answered already. Or if you're distracted and you're thinking, okay, well, what's my next question going to be? Because he just took me in a totally different direction. It wasn't in the notes, and now I got to figure out how to scramble, and then I go to ask a question and it's just completely not in line with where we should be going with this. So you're right. If you're just listening for a pause, you're not really listening.
Yep. And I think we're very gifted that we have Zoom, where, as opposed to conference calls that we used to have, where you can not only listen to the people, but you can see them and watch their inflection, watch their body language a bit. And I think that's also very important.
Oh, well, I know in television, it's really big. And this is one of the lessons you learn when you're doing live television very quickly, is that a medium shot in TV is somewhat, depending how, this is not a medium shot, my shot right now, but it's kind of like this. Well, that's much closer than the way you would personally engage with somebody. You're not that close to them. So all the more reason you're noticing where their eyes are going. If they're looking down, they're not looking at the angle as if they would be looking in someone's eyes. If they're looking off, if the eye roll goes up, if there's an eye roll. I mean, the way you're sitting, the posture that you have, your shoulders back. I mean, all of that shows that you're engaged and you are listening, and you fully represent that you're listening with your body language. And we all know the arms crossed and that the defensive position, the rest of it. But I think
I once heard a criticism of Wolf Blitzer. He was interviewing somebody, and they were obviously lying. And the critique was from someone in your role, who a professional broadcaster, said Wolf should have picked up on that.
Yeah, it's really, it's easy to sit in armchair, assess it all, but
because you're in the moment. You have to. The camera is on and rolling, and you're
camera's
live.
on and rolling. You may not be able to completely grab the facts to call him or her, whatever they're saying. That's the falsehood. You may have a producer talking in your IFB at the same time he or she is talking. Or you just may not want to go down that rabbit hole on that. That'll take the whole interview down a different direction. So it's a call. That's one of those things in live TV, for talent and anchors, especially if it's an interview format like that, it's a constant judgment call. Okay, do I call him on that? Do I not call him on that? Do we go deeper in that? Do we not go deeper in that? Do we change direction? So
knowing you only have 5 more seconds.
I know, yeah. It's a split-second decision that you're making. You're making that decision, right? And sometimes you don't make it. Sometimes the line producer says, "We got to move along, man. We can't keep going." It depends. Some line producers talk more than other line producers, but so there's a lot of considerations in a very brief window of time that you got to go through and make the call.
But to your outline again, you have to know when to pivot. You may hear something in a meeting and you need to act on it. You don't want to just be married to your script.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this year was the year that proved that to all of us. This past year with coronavirus and COVID-19 has been the year of the pivot in every aspect of our lives.
Okay.
But also is very important in business and in any form of business communication. What you thought the direction you should go in, or the pitch that you should use, or the paper you should, whatever it might be. If you talk to enough people or the situation changes, as you said, you can't stick to your script. It's going to require more work. You may have to go all the way back to square one, but you have to do it. You have to shift. And it may be just adjusting a few sentences here or there, or adjusting, a few of the written words and that direction of the paragraph, remove a paragraph, whatever it is. But if you're not agile in today's business world, you're really going to be left behind, because things today move so fast that to keep up, you got to be on your toes.
We're in a period of great disruption.
Yes.
Before COVID, I would have cited BlackBerry disappearing in 9 months. Their whole market just disappearing. Now, this is more disruption than I've ever seen in my business lifetime. I'm pretty old.
You'll be both, and
getting older through this COVID thing. But,
well, I mean,
but to your point, you have to be agile at this point.
I mean, I just
even change the discussion when you're having a meeting if you hear something.
Right. I mean, for us with our video production company, a lot of our work is with hospitals. Well, you can't get in and shoot in hospitals. There was no way. What's the workaround on that? Videos still have to be produced. And this is a lot of production companies completely shut down. Others, you then had people on site shooting iPhone video, people that were there in the hospital working. They would have a minute to shoot video. You'd be amazed the quality of video depending on the person who's shooting it with an iPhone, one of the later models. You're going to get some good quality stuff. So if you combine that with still photos or JPEGs and some iPhone or mobile phone footage. You actually, with the right graphics, music, and the right storyboarding and putting it all together,
Mhm.
actually you can get an okay piece. It may not be what you would have done if you could have actually shot on scene, but
No.
it's the pivot. What else are you going to do? So
One of my secrets is that Seth Meyer and Stephen Colbert explained to me that I really didn't need a studio to start Chat with Matt.
did they?
They were broadcasting from home.
Oh, from home. Everybody is, right?
Seth Meyer was in his attic with the wasp.
I mean, all the reporters, you see national reporters, and you see like, oh, what do they have on their bookshelf? Oh,
Yeah, right. So
oh.
let's talk about collaboration and communication. Good segue, because you're talking about everybody's participating and feeding you information.
Right. And in television news, it is a highly collaborative project. Everybody has their role, but every day at the same time, it all has to come together. And collaborate, it means a give and take, a shift, a pivot, but it also includes listening to other people's ideas. There may be a long-term piece you're working on, and you're working on, this would happen, many of the reporters, I know myself, you'd be working on a piece and your videographer would say to you, yeah, but don't you think you really should be talking about, like, wow, I never thought of it from that perspective. I never thought, I got kind of into a zone and I was going in that direction, but you're making a very valid point. I mean, and we would find some of the, in the collaborative moments in the meetings, some really fresh perspective would come from our interns, because we would all be kind of in the groove of the daily meeting and the way it's all done, the way you make the sausage. And a 19-year-old would sit there and say, in a very nice way, they'd just say, oh, well, that's not what my friends have heard. That's not what we're talking about. Or this is, oh, really? But we thought that, and you thought, oh, this is the way this next generation is thinking. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should listen to them, because this is our feeder audience. This is the up and coming audience that you want to start to foster along the way, so they stay with you as time goes on.
I don't know if you know, the lawyer's rule is never ask a question to which you don't already know the answer.
Yes.
So sometimes I ask questions and I get a different answer. and then I say, my saying is, I wish I'd thought of that. Or well, glad I asked.
And business, and then collaboration is key. I mean, some people are independent operators and they don't on a day-to-day basis have to collaborate, but that's where you get into networking, and talking to other people that work in your field, because they may have an approach, an idea, a tool that you are not aware of, or you haven't used, you haven't had time to learn. They may have a different way to put together a pitch. So it's, obviously, you consider the source, and some people you don't take what they say, but it's, the collaboration is key.
Since I know you know my wife Peggy and have worked with her, one of the things she always lectures me about is not to ask yes or no questions.
Well, it's kind of a dead interview, right?
Yeah, right. Just yes or no. Ask an open-ended question. You get sometimes things that are great value to you. Yes. So we should talk about nonverbal communication, because you're on Zoom, you're on. And one of my friends, he coaches people who are starting new jobs, and he's going to be on Chat with Matt in a few weeks. One of the points he made to me early on that I found extremely valuable is that everything communicates.
Yeah, true. From the lighting to the backdrop to the clothes you have on, to the
everything is communicated.
Right. Right. So, and that's back again to your posture, the expression on your face, the expression on your face when you're just listening. Yep. Excuse me. That's key.
And one of the things I got from your conversations with Peggy was maintaining a pleasant face.
Yes, your resting face. Does that have a pleasant smile on it? Or are you grimacing? Are you looking with disapproval?
Or if someone says something and you get an expression of horror on your face.
So
You have to be careful not to overreact.
overreact, overlaugh, you know, posture like this. I mean, I think Zoom is a real challenge because Zoom meetings, I know people that, a lawyer that she's on Zoom meetings from 10 in the morning until 6 at night because they work in different time zones. It's brutal. She said it's just brutal.
Yeah.
Maintaining that level of attention by living in a little box hour after hour is very difficult.
Right. And you never know who's watching you as opposed to the person who's speaking.
This is so true. Oh, go ahead, Peg.
No, I wanted to ask a question because I think this kind of goes back to where you were and I don't want to lose it. Anne wants to know, if you have a complex problem that you need to get across to your audience, how do you break it? How do you come about breaking it down without oversimplifying? Do you have any tips on how to make sure that they get it, but it's complex and you don't want to oversimplify?
I mean, I would think, you remember the movie Philadelphia, and he said, explain it to me like a, what is it, a third grader or a sixth grader or whatever it is. I would really break it down to its most basic and then build it back up. So break it down so it's a raw set of facts. And then depending on your audience, then start filling it in and making the level of the language a little bit more complicated, the sentences a little bit more complicated, add a little bit more fact to a little bit more meat on the bones. So I would work backwards, really. Strip it down and then build it back up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So you made the point in your notes about controlling your emotions you're on camera and you have to control your emotions. I'm a sailor, and one of the things I always tell people is the captain can show no fear.
Right. Well,
if the crew thinks we're all going to die, you are screwed.
So true. And if you're a news anchor and you fall apart, especially in breaking news, yes, there are some moments of real emotion, and some stories are just so gut wrenching that they require, you know, occasionally an anchor will cry. But for the most part, you've got to keep it together. You have to not show not only sadness or fear, but anger. Anger is a big one. Or you can't lose your cool. I mean, how many times over the course of television news have you seen an anchor reporter kind of snap on the air?
It doesn't happen often.
It doesn't happen often, but they think they're off camera, but they're really not. But and it's, you know, obviously they get let go, or they say something in a hot mic they shouldn't have said. So you really have to control yourself, the way you react. You can't overreact. You gotta keep cool. And I think that's true in business, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. The next topic we're going to cover is choosing the right platform for your communication. I mean, we're mostly talking about Zoom today, but we have so many communication avenues that we can choose for whatever it is we want to communicate. Twitter isn't necessarily the right one. Email isn't always the right one. And a Zoom call isn't always the right one.
Yeah, I think you have to know very clearly what your message is and who you're talking to. And that way, you know, maybe it's social media you reach out, depending on your age. So that you can reach a wide group of people with a post on Instagram. I know in television news, it would be what goes into the newscast, but then you take it over to the website, take it to the social platforms as well. Which social platform? Twitter usually is one for news. Facebook as well, but to a lesser extent. And then that's true in businesses. You know, I think whether it's on the creative side, Instagram is a way to go. Or it could be Twitter, which is really more official and breaking news. LinkedIn is another social platform that is very effective in business.
No. The people who drive me nuts are the ones who text me all the time. Because I have no way of preserving it. I actually print some of my messages because I have a lot of projects I'm working on, and I need to be able to recall quickly what it was I wrote back and forth.
You can preserve your text. If you
well, they're not convenient on my phone.
You can just take the text, click on it, and share it and email it to yourself and then print it.
Well, not as effective as if I got an email.
Well, yes, but
Becky, we'll let Becky weigh in here on using the right platform for your.
We run into this all the time that we just corresponded with an editor, and it was an edit revision sheet. And it went on, I mean, it's minutiae, it's frames, it's seconds, it's, you know, colors, slight variation. We put it in the form of an email, but then we always text the editor. We just sent it over to you because he's always going to be looking on his phone. I mean, the younger generation, they live by their phones. So,
Yes.
so you can't ignore a text, but if you want a communication of record, I usually go to email and then I accompany it with a text. And as Peggy said, you can always print it out, but sometimes a good old letter goes a long way, depending on who you're talking to and depending on.
If you don't have some paper, you should use it.
It depends on the age of the person receiving. It depends what you're talking about. Some documentation needs to go via the mail. Just has to.
Right. So, you know, if you're sending somebody a subpoena, it has to be in writing.
Right. Certain things from the IRS have to come in snail mail. That's just the way it is. So I think
exactly. But as a manager, as a supervisor, as someone running meetings, or meetings can take place in on various platforms. An email with a lot of people on copy is a form of communication. I don't know if I mentioned it, but there was an article, and I mentioned it to you. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, a full page on using the right platform.
Yes, and that, you know, gets back to audience. You know, certain people use certain platforms, and that's the best way to get to them. And knowing all of them, you know, well, I mean, YouTube is huge now. So, you know, just knowing who you're communicating with and the best way to reach them. I mean, even a phone call. I know it's that doesn't happen very often either, but you know, sometimes a phone call goes a long way.
There's a lot of people who will not pick up the phone.
Yes,
even 10 years ago, when I was communicating with some of our marketing folks at our sponsors, they would email me and I would call them. They would send me another email and I would call them, and they would send me another email. I couldn't get them on the phone.
Some people
there are some things you need to talk through, and to the points we've been making here, sometimes you hear a little inflection in the voice and you can take the conversation to a different place.
Well, that's it. The tone is difficult to decipher so often.
Email, one of the things I say is email has no tone.
Well, I mean, all caps will tell you a tone real fast, but for the most part, yes, you're kind of left. There is definitely a lot of room for interpretation.
So let's talk about getting feedback.
Well,
as a leader in your corporate practice.
Well, in television news, I mean, the feedback is your ratings, right? And if we would get ratings in terms of viewership, but then we would get something called a Q rating, and that was for talent. So how do people relate to you? Did they like you? Did they feel like you were trustworthy? Did they feel like you understood the material that you were reporting on? So we would get those back, and then those, you know, of course, as you know, in advertising, you see where the ratings are, where the best place to place the ads is. And if you're finding you're not bringing any ad revenue, then you really need to reassess what you're doing and where the problems might be. So, I mean, I think feedback in business is essential. I think people have become this has become something that is widely done now with data and analytics. I mean, feedback used to be maybe on a monthly basis. Now it's it's just constant. The analytics is just ongoing. But even surveys, questionnaires, comments, all of those things help you reshape what you're doing if it needs to be reshaped. You get the feedback from the people either you're working with, the person that uses your product or uses your service or whatever it might be. It just helps you redefine the way you reach out to people. It helps you make changes in your own performance. It's an invaluable tool.
You know, and some of it is misused. You know, for example, Staples was sending a note about, what did you think of that iPhone cord you bought? I mean, really, did they need to send, or the AAA batteries you bought? We need a review of that. I mean, they could probably fine tune that form of communication.
Right. I'm sure that there's a whole team of people that have had that conversation, but it must be effective for them to some level. I mean, that's the thing. You can send out now because of, you know, electronic communication. You can.
Yes. Well, that's exactly the point. it's too, and in our group, we get into this with regard to job postings as an example. It used to be you had to actually type out a letter and put it in an envelope and mail it. And now you just have to click send.
Right.
So people, there's a tendency to over communicate across some of these communication channels that we're gifted to have.
Yes, absolutely. But I think overall, I mean, yeah, as you well know in your career and the folks listening to this today, that, you know, it used to be there would be an annual review. So that's the feedback you would get as an employee.
Mhm.
Now they're getting to the point where they have like 360 reviews. I mean, it's an ongoing assessment process, which I think is probably, which is better. I mean, it doesn't, you know, once a year you find out, oh, if I had fixed this back in February, I would have gotten the increase that I really feel like I deserve. Well, wow, if I had known that, I would have made some changes.
Right. Or managers would say, well, I'm saving that for your annual review. Really?
Yeah, no.
If there are any surprises in your annual review, that manager doesn't know what he's doing.
Right. It has to, ongoing assessment, I think they've have found, I mean, you know, it can't be burdensome, but it can certainly be a tool that can help, you know, craft somebody's, you know, career and really get them to optimal performance.
Yeah, it's all forms of communication, and all that we all as managers need to keep effective. Your last point is how to effort the story daily, weekly, and I didn't understand that, so I'll let you explain it.
So in television news, let's say you have a breaking story and it's got phenomenal video, compelling video, the story is riveting. It impacts a wide audience. So having that air on one 24-hour rotation is really a waste of good video, a good story, and keeping your audience engaged. So as they say, does the story have legs? Meaning it can continue on. You can continue to cover that story for weeks, sometimes years. Murder cases go on for years. You know, politics, you see things that go, stories that go on for years. So, but the secret to it is finding a way to make that story new and fresh every day. So it can be the same story, but the lead line is very different. And that's where it comes to being a good reporter, a good researcher. You know, what is different about this story today? Why is it relevant today? And I think in business and communication, you can't keep hitting potential clients with the same pitch, the same email, the same subject line. Everything has to be freshened. It has to be adjusted to the time. It has to be reflective of the time, of the product, of changing, of launches of products, whatever it might be. So even though it might be the same product, there may be a new development. There was something written about it, whatever it might be. In communication and business, it's the long game. You and I've talked about this. It's not just a one and done. You really want to establish long-term relationships. And that, even if you don't work together, even if it's like a coworker and you have established a good relationship, you know, and they move on or you move on, maintaining those relationships is amazing how you come full circle depending on your feel with that person again. So I've always said, you know, you have to really look at the long haul in your career and the way you communicate, and keeping, when it comes to relationships with clients, keeping it fresh, keeping the same story, but with a totally different spin on it. And then think long-term about how you can keep that relationship going, whatever kind of communication. It could be on a personal level or professional.
It's a good lesson. The product, in the case of people who are listening in, who are active in their search, is that we're the product, and we keep presenting it to sometimes the same audience, and we have to keep the story fresh.
Right, because then you lose your audience. You have to figure out a way, and sometimes it requires a lot of creativity. But if you are creative and you can come up with an idea that, and you don't have to do this every day after a while, you know, but you know, once a month, and engage, you know, an email to somebody that you've been trying to sell a service to, but you've got a catchy new line, or, oh, the headline today showed, well, that's just exactly what's happening with us too, whatever it might be.
Yeah, you have to keep it fresh.
Have to keep it fresh, and the same holds true in television news.
All right, so we're wrapping up here, and the chat box is of course open. Otherwise, Becky and I are going to keep talking. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box real quick. And if we run out of time, we can run over a little bit. We won't get cut off like if we were on live TV.
Oh, there was a comment that said about the importance of communication, and Phil says, I often use a secondary method of communication to ensure my message was received. You know, don't rely on, well, I sent them an email. And I think that's important, that when you're talking about various platforms, that we have all these platforms that maybe we need. Sometimes, like you said, you send the email, but then you text. And I think that's an important point, and I think it was worth repeating, because too often people say, well, I sent them an email, they didn't respond. And that,
Right. And there's
well, I left a voice message and they didn't call me back.
Right. And every communication tool, email, for example, you can put a read receipt on it. So you know, oh, I got notified they actually read the email. So I know they've read it. So that's, you know, there are various ways that you can ensure that your communication has at least reached, you know, has gotten to the person or the company that you want to get it to. Yeah, voicemails are tough. I don't know if people respond to voicemails much anymore. I really don't.
Yeah, so what I do in my search practice is I call people. If I need to reach them, I need to reach them. So I call them. If I don't get them, I might pop them an email, and then I'll send them a text message.
Right.
They're going to realize they need to call me.
Yes. Yes.
I can't take a chance. I need them now. So very important.
Yeah. And
why don't you tell us how you've moved your career? I know you've started your own business, and I'm always interested in reinvention stories.
Right. Well, we saw in my partner Gillian Neff and I saw that there was a niche in terms of the move in all businesses now is to have some kind of video representation on your website, on your social platform, in your messaging. And going to a big agency in the city or any city is an expensive proposition. And there are lots of new tools that are out there for people who want to try to do it themselves, especially younger people. But there's an area in between. You can put together a video, but if you don't tell a good story, no one's going to really, maybe they'll look at some flashy effects. But if the story is not compelling, then you're not going to get the engagement and future business that you want. So we decided to take our careers and our history of storytelling, because that's what we've spent our careers doing, and then helping companies and not-for-profits and brands tell stories, help them tell their story. Write a story that people want to listen to and stories they want to watch. So that's what we pivoted to. It's very interesting though, as I said before, COVID kind of changed everything. We're now all kind of looking forward to get back out there again. And I think we will, because more and more as you look at the growing success of YouTube, for example, of Reels on Instagram, TikTok. I mean, video is where it all is. The generation that's coming up is driven by video. Video is where they live. So we saw an opportunity, and it's been very interesting, shifting to owning your own business, starting your own business, and serving as, you know, as I say, chief cook and bottle washer has been a learning experience, but it's been great.
How did you pick your business partner?
We had worked together for 17 years.
Okay.
It was not, I think choosing a business partner probably is one of the hardest things, because I agree. It's really tough, because you may not realize it until you're in the trenches together, how different your styles are. And sometimes those styles can be compatible, and sometimes those styles just clash, and that is a really tough way to work.
It is.
So we have really, and now we've gotten to the point where we recognize our differences. And so one will say, okay, yeah, I'll take care of that, because we just know, oh, you've deal with the accountant and the bookkeeping. Okay, well, you deal with finding music. Well, you talk to a graphic designer. We each have our area where we enjoy. First of all, what do you like doing? And then where do you excel? Hopefully they're hand in hand. But so it's been a really nice working relationship.
Yeah.
And it's very different, as all entrepreneurs out there will tell you. It's a very it's a different thing than working.
It's the most difficult choice you make, really.
It is.
When I started my business, I had 6 partners. I settled in at 3. I had to get rid of 3 of them because, to your point, they were just not compatible to what I was doing. And the business partner I've been with now, we've been together for 20 years. Longer than some marriages last, you know.
Sure, a lot
And we still like each other. It's amazing.
Well, that's it. I think, you have to have some similar principles and morals and ways of looking at life. And so, because, it can easily be midnight Sunday and you're still working on something, or it all falls apart and one has to be there to support the other. And, not in a horrible way, but, this is just the nature of running a business.
Right. So those of you who are starting business, be forewarned. If you're not going to do it alone, who you pick is as important as anything else in this world.
And I have to say, just to give it a positive spin, not in terms of choosing a partner, but just starting your own business. It is incredibly hard, but very rewarding. I mean, there's no getting stale when you own your own business. You don't have that luxury.
The best thing I ever did, I can tell you that.
Right. Yes, being your own boss, I want to be my own boss. Well, that's a little overrated, being your own boss. The buck stops with you is what happens.
Yeah.
But
Becky, as I tell people, I only work from 9 to 9:30 every day, but sadly, that's not 30 minutes.
And that's so
being your own boss has its advantages, but you're always working.
You're always working, you're never off the clock, but at the same time, you're always learning. I mean, I think of just from a technical point of view from the business. I was always looking at television from the editorial side, not as much from the technical side. I mean, now I've had to familiarize myself with file sizes and file types and uploading, cloud services and, 5K, 4K, whatever, that file is way too big. Oh, the only way we can do it is overnight a hard drive. So it's been and that's just one little teeny area that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So
you're very fortunate starting a business in this niche at a time when costs have been greatly reduced.
Yes, I mean, it's a fine line because costs have been greatly reduced and quality of consumer level equipment has gotten better. You do have to differentiate yourself, but it's like anything. It's just building relationships with people who eventually become familiar with your work and turn to you, and then maintaining those relationships. They may not have a project for you right now, but they may in 6 months from now. So touching base with those people periodically. Yeah, it's been really one of the most, other than first starting off in TV, probably one of the most exhilarating parts of my career.
So it's AuthenTicityTV.com, correct?
Yes. We call ourselves Authenticity TV and video because we do really videos, the crux of it. But that is the website, AuthenTicityTV.com. Yep.
As long as they can spell it, they will find you.
Well, yes, we found that as a challenge.
Well, I want to tell you, we've covered more ground than I think I've ever covered with any guest on Chat with Matt.
Oh, good.
You have been amazing, but this is what you do. So,
well, yeah, it's
very impressive.
Well, good. I hope I was able to impart some useful information to your audience, and this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Anything we
didn't? Thank you so much.
Cover? Anything? Any last words for our audience, the people who are staying with us here?
I think we covered it all. I think to me, the one thing that is just for me personally is just agility. It's all about agility these days. Just staying as fluid as you possibly can, whether you're finding out you've been furloughed or lose a job or searching for a job or whatever it might be. You really have to be willing to take a step one direction that you didn't think you were going to do, or take a step in another direction.
Yeah, it's all about staying current and staying relevant. And we have so many tools today of a communication nature. and using them correctly. You've been just extremely helpful. So I'll thank you profusely for being on Chat with Matt. This was just great.
Well, thank
And
you.
we did record this session. So if you enjoyed it, tell your friends about it, and it'll be posted on our website very shortly.
Okay,
Becky,
great.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to
Thank
all
you
of you
so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay well.
joining us for Chat with Matt. Take care
Bye
and stay safe. And if you have a few extra bucks, please make a donation to our very fine networking group. Thank you.